Um, my name is Andres Castillo. I am the lead partnership specialist for the County of San Bernardino. Currently, we have a total of we had about 10. There's been some restructuring in our area. And so there's about 10 of us working in San Bernardino. And this is what we do. We reach out to the communities. We have reached out to the state commission and tell them about the census. They're on board. Then we went down to the city level, local government. We reached out to the Yucca Valley City Hall. We spoke with the mayor, 29 Palms. And because there's 10 of us in San Bernardino, I assist 3 cities. I assist 29 Palms, Yucca Valley, and the city of Needles. And so we've been doing very well with Needles, and so we wanted to extend that same outcome to not only 29 Palms, but Yucca Valley, and every city and town in between. We know we have, unincorporated towns and cities, communities, so we want to be able to reach everyone. But I'm here to talk to you about the census and why the census is so important for our community. It's in the Constitution. If you read Article 1, Section 2, it tells us that every 10 years there was going to be a head count of the nation. It's for power. Representation, the more people are in the community, the more population density there is. Of course, that means more representation. That's how cities and boundaries, school districts get divided based on the population density. And of course, being that the census is one way or that we can make changes in our community. We can bring new programs, rebuild roads, hospitals, schools. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Again, why does it matter? It's for power, basically, right? It was written back in our Constitution, and that's what it's for. Reapportioning in this coming census, more than $675 billion every year for the next 10 years will be distributed among the cities and towns and communities. And again, this is based on population density. It's so important to understand that the funding will depend on population density. Well, how do we get that? By ensuring that everyone gets counted. And how do we ensure that everyone gets counted? Well, we have to let them know that it's coming. So these are some of the programs that the data is, of course, used for, that the data is used for to appropriate fundings. We have schools, again, daycare. Some of the questions in the census has to do with age. Now we have a young one here in the audience. And so we know that it's important to count ages because this is how the funding will be distributed. If we have a large amount of young ones in the community, well, we know we need schools. If we have an elderly population, some people with disabilities, then based on that, we know what we need in our communities. Again, this is how cities and towns also grow. We have developers and investors looking into the census data in a 10-year forecast to see how the growth is doing. And so if they see there's a growth in a community, well, guess what? They're going to put something in that community. I came from the city of Needles, and about 8 years ago, they lost a grocery store, and it was their only grocery store. And so they are begging and fighting to get another grocery store in their town, in their city. And so it may seem elementary, but really this is how changes happen based on the census data. Planning and urban rural land use, scientific research, housing, public transportation. This is all that the census data is used for that forecasting of funding, of course. Excuse me. I'm fighting a cough, so you're going to let me clear my throat a little bit. So this is the first time that the census will provide census responses online. This is the first year that everyone will be able to respond online, in addition to the paper form and the phone services. So this will cut down on costs, also will make things easier, faster, speedier, and everything will be updated on a real time. So then we know exactly where to go as the census is being taken. 12 languages besides the English language. That's how the census will provide the information over the internet and phone. And then, of course, there's other languages that we'll be covering in just a little bit. Based on on what the way the census is working, they're going to be sending about 95% of the invitations will be through the mail. The other 5%, that's going to be through our community outreach. In the city of 29 Palms, we're forming what is called a complete count committee. And that's a committee based on local members, trusted voices that know how to reach this, what historically has been low response population. The state of California calls it hard to count population. So these members in this committee, because of their knowledge of the city, town, and community, they'll be able to target those cities, those places where we may find those individuals facing homelessness, perhaps parents who are, maybe living in a house, 2 or 3 families, and they're scared. So we want to put those fears aside. We want to ensure that the census is not to point someone out, but we really need the funding. And again, the funding comes by counting those individuals. The 1% on the right bottom talks about how Alaska, this is how the early, of course, census was going to be taken. January 21st or 23rd, I believe, Alaska started doing their census because of the weather out there. And so they started early. We start April 1st. April 1st. I also have some information here on the table, so at the end of the presentation, or right now, if you like, you can come and get one so you can follow along. Again, the invitation is going to be over the mail. Everyone will be receiving an invitation to respond online, and that's going to happen as early as March 12th to the 20th. Mail, the Census Bureau is working with the Postal Service, so the mail is staggered, so we're not overburdening the Postal Services. And again, as soon as you receive that invitation to respond online, please, we encourage you to do so. There's going to be, after that first invitation, if people choose not to respond online, well, they're going to be receiving 4 reminders: postcard, letter, postcard, letter. So we really want you to respond. And if that doesn't happen, people still choose not to respond online, well, we still have the census paper questionnaire, which is still available, and over the phone as well. That's still available for the public. So nothing has changed. We just added that easiness, or that easy, I guess you could say, the easy way of responding to the census, which is through the internet. This slide shows you about 59 other languages that will be available for advertisements. The only other language that the census will be provided with in the paper questionnaire is going to be Spanish. That's the only other language. That's based on the population increase, of course, in the Spanish language. Again, and that's because of what has been determined through the American Community Surveys, all these other surveys that has been going on every 3 to 5 years. This is how we get those numbers. If the person in the house is about 14 years of age or older, well, they can help mom and dad answer that census. Okay. All these gives you an idea of the other languages that the population will receive advertisement online. We have Russian, Laos, Albanian, all these other languages that will be provided for engagement, for education purposes. And of course, because everything online brings confidentiality issues, the census wants the public to know how we take care of your data. We protect your data as census representative, as a partnership specialist, as leads, of course. We take your data very seriously. We don't disclose your email, phone number, name, or address to anyone. We don't use it to promote any kind of legal battles that they may have with the CIA, FBI, ICE, whatever, they want to get our information. We don't do that. We as partnership specialists, we take an oath when we come on board. We take an oath that we will protect your identity and your privacy, of course. You can see the hefty penalty for any of us, for any one case. It could be up to $250,000 and 5 years in prison. That's and, not or. Okay, and if there's 3 of them, let's say I release 3 names, well, you can do the math. And yeah, I wouldn't be coming home for the next 15 years, and my wife would be pretty sad. Anyway, and my kids too. So this is the time to remember. March 22nd, March 12th to the 20th, that's where your first invitation, you'll be receiving around this time frame, your invitation to respond online. Again, if you choose not to do that, then you get those 4 reminders after that. And if still that doesn't happen, that's when you get that knock on the door. And we have representatives here, managers that would be ensuring that knock on the door happens. We want to get everyone counted. Everyone, whether they're homeless, whether they're experiencing homelessness, or they're part of a shelter, whether they're in the hospital. And here in 29 Palms, we have the Marine base. So we're working with the Marine base to, to ensure that we get a proper count of that base. This is the time frame, of course, of what's going on, what's happening at this time. Back in 2018, that's when the push started moving forward to get those personnel higher, such as myself, partnership specialist. And then right now we are in February. Group quarters, again, group quarter has to do with what I just mentioned. Marine base installation, hospitals, where the elderly sleep most of the time, things like that. Okay, those are the group quarters. And that's pretty much it as far as the information. So we want you to remember this. $675 billion for federal funding every year for the next 10 years. April 1st, that's the day that census begins. First time is going to be conducted online, in addition to the paper and the phone services. Those are the main 3 points. We want to reach everyone, ladies and gentlemen, everyone in our community, because this is how we are going to make changes and bring forth programs into our community. Again, this information will give you an idea of what the Complete Count Committee will do. We have one established in 29 Palms. As a matter of fact, we have a training tomorrow at the college. And also we have one at the city of Needles. So the Complete Count Committee, again, is based on individuals. It's an active committee that promotes information to the community. It can be based on our government for education purposes. We can invite someone from the faith-based, from the churches. We can invite someone, local businesses, military personnel, anyone that has knowledge about the community. Okay? And this is the purpose: to engage, to enroll, to educate, to encourage participation. That's it. That's the bread and butter of the Complete Count Committee, to encourage participation. How do we do that? Well, by just reaching out to the community. We have a lot of events in the community. We have car shows, we have Pioneer Days, we have parades, we have the local markets, we have the farmers market. These are all avenues that we can use to distribute information about the census, about why it's so important. And I've attended some of them, as a matter of fact. And so it has become very, very effective. People ask questions, they get informed, they get the latest and greatest from the census. And so they leave our booth with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit more security of what's going to happen in the next few months. Again, Census Day is color red. That's the day to remember. I put this slide here because this little dark section right here, the darker section, is composed of 2 tracts. And a tract is a piece of land that covers it has to do with population. It covers, it houses maybe between 2,000 and 8,000 individuals, but the average is about 4,000. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, you do work with this information. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's a line going like this. This is Joshua Tree. This is the border of Joshua Tree. This is Yucca, on this side is 29 Palms. So there's a legend on the right-hand side that based on the color of this legend gives you an idea of the low response that has happened historically in this area, okay? Now, I think this is green, if I'm not mistaken. This is a color green. So based on this color, I'm looking at my legend, and it tells me that between 20 to 24.5 of the population has not responded to the census. Or, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Based on this number, it's predicted that 20 to 25% will not respond to the census. And that has to do with, like, again, all these surveys that have been going on every year, 2 or 3 years. So they get a prediction of what the response rate is. So it tells us then that, historically speaking, Joshua Tree has a response rate of about 75 to 78%. It's not 100%. So we want to increase those numbers. Now, the population of Joshua Tree is about 6,000, roughly. 6,000, 7,000? 8,000 now? Okay, 8,000, 8,000, okay.
On the weekend and how many Airbnbs are open.
That's right, that's right. Of course, unfortunately, we don't count those Airbnbs, but we count the population. So if there's any Airbnbs that are empty, we can't count them, right? We want to see where those people are living. So this is why it's so important to count the population. So these two lines right here, this is one line, and this is two lines. These are census tracts, and these is, of course, these are two tracts that make up or that cover Joshua Tree. Notice that in one tract, the low response is, I put my glasses on, still can see. Yep, it's about 24, and the other one is about 22%. Okay, so this is how we get our data. This is how we interpret data, and this is how we provide it to the Complete Count Committee, so they themselves can do their outreach. So this is a public website, Response Outreach Area Mapper. Anyone can go in here, and anyone can get this information. It's free, okay? And that's pretty much it. This is another slide, which is the same one, but it gives you an idea of where we're at. This is Highway 247, this is Highway 62, and this is somewhere where we're at right now. We have the south side of 62 and the north side of Highway 62 in Joshua Tree. So based on this, we can tell where those low response, hard to count population are at. Okay, so that's just, I just wanted to show you that so you get an idea of why is it that we're reaching out to the community for response. That's my name, and that's my co-workers. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here. They had a prior engagement. And so, are there any questions at this time? I'll open up for questions.
How are you going to form the teams?
The question is how I'm going to form the teams. When you mention the word teams, specifically, what are you referring to?
Well, the groups that are going to actually push this forward.
Well, we always go to the top. We always go to the highest form of local government. In 29 Palm, we reached out to Frank Lucchino. We reached out to the mayor, of course, before that. And so they're on board. They passed the resolution, they passed a proclamation, and that's how we do it. And then we ask them to see if they're willing to form a complete count committee. I tried reaching out here in Joshua Tree, but there's no Chamber of Commerce, there's no City Hall. We are working with the board of supervisors. So that's District 3, yourself and Ms. Rowe. So we know that we're working in that section. We're trying to reach the MAGs and the CSAs to see if we can, because that's out of my hands, I've only work with the local governments. Anything that has to do with the CSAs and the MACs, that's out of my hands. That has to do with the supervisor. Does that answer your question, Ms. Lundquist? Any other questions?
For
Yes?
the complete count committee, have they, you said there was a training tomorrow on 29 palms. Has that already been closed, been pre-selected? Who's attending that?
Your question has to do with the complete count committee tomorrow? Yes. Actually, the training will be going on at the Joshua Tree at the college, Copper Mountain Community College. That has not been closed. That's still open for those who still would like to be part of that complete count committee. There's a group already selected to be part of that complete count committee, and that's of course, those are dealing with 29 palms at this time. If anyone would like to join that complete count committee for outreach purposes, they're more than welcome to come. It's going to be happening about 3:30 to 5, and they can speak with Ms. Sandy Smith. She is the executive director for the foundation at the college.
The mechanics of the complete count committee, are they going door to door, or are they just seeing whether, making sure that statistics get in?
So the question is, what is the mechanics of the complete count committee? Is that your question, Mr. Lindquist? The mechanics is like I mentioned before, it has to do with outreach purposes. They will be communicating within themselves, establishing local events, participating in local events for the dissemination of information. So again, if the complete count committee, when they look at that information that we just talked about a little bit here, when they look at this information, and they'll say, well, you know, we need to reach those individuals facing homelessness. Well, where do we find them? And then members in the complete count committee will say, well, you know, I know that between this side and this side, I have seen some individuals. Well, let's go over there. If another part of the group, the committee says, well, you know, let me work with the parents to provide those information, that incentive. Well, then you have someone, again, excuse me, from the school district working with the parents to provide the needed direction and answer any other questions. So based on the population that we find outside, we have specific members in the committee that can help answer those questions. It's an active committee. We're trying to do the best we can as far as the outreach purposes. And because of that, we need them. The census cannot do it alone. That's why we're reaching out to these committees. Does that answer your question, sir?
So would your team be available if some people volunteer to form a committee?
So the question is, will our team be available? The answer is yes. We provide the training, we bring the materials, we give them ideas, and again, we help them with this process of identifying those pockets of the areas where you're going to find those low response, hard to count population. We do come numerous times, and we provide the training as the operations are going. So we'll provide what is called the, we have a training coming up, which has to do with there's an acronym, QAC, QAC, they call it QAC, but it's Questionnaire Assistance Center. Questionnaire Assistance Center. And these are centers, it could be a room like this, with computers, with ADA accessibility, Wi-Fi accessibility, so where people can come and get those information. So we're providing that kind of training. We provide this training, community outreach training, and things like that.
So if we were to ask the point in time count group that did the counts in this area, they would obviously qualify for the training if they volunteer for doing that?
Well, for doing that, again, that has to go through the supervisors, the supervisor in charge of handling, of speaking with the county supervisors. But the answer is, if Joshua Tree is willing to put a complete count committee together, the answer is yes. We'll come.
Be approved by the supervisor?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then, of course, that will have to go through the county. There is funding that is disseminated through the county, and that's
Funding?
yes for outreach purposes. Yes, and that's
Will they pay those volunteers?
that would be up to them to decide. That has to be worked out
Where
between.
does the funding go? Where does
It's
it come from and where does it go?
it's coming from the state, and it will go straight to those complete count committees.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
ma'am.
complete count committee is only for information dissemination. They would not be doing the actual census, going and and getting the census count on those people?
So the question is the complete count committee, is that only for information dissemination and not census takers? The answer to that is that's correct. The complete count committee is only there to engage the community. Because we're dealing with personable, identifiable information, it's called as PII, there has to be some kind of training, some kind of insurance that your information is not going to be, disseminated to anyone else. And this is why the census takes this process very seriously. So we have trained personnel that will be asking those questions because that data, can be misused. And so we want to make sure that those who are asking those questions are trusted individuals as well. Yeah. So census takers, that comes afterwards. The complete count committee is only to engage the community. Yes, ma'am. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
That question, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions?
I have a general.
No, sure. Go ahead, ma'am.
Do you have a lot of information about the census itself?
Do we have a lot of information about? Do
Or
I?
I can ask a question, not about this, but about the census.
We do have a website that can answer any of your questions. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is,
Whether I know it or not, I don't know, but we'll see.
the census counts incarcerated people where they are in prison and in jail. They can't vote for their representative. The money doesn't really help them. Why aren't they counted at a home of record so that when they get out, then they are represented, and that those people that are left behind get some money and some representation? To me, it's like you're not helping either part by counting in place with a prison or a jail.
Right. So the question has to do with those who are incarcerated. Why are they counted at the institution and not their home and record? This is the way the census has decided to do their count. We don't know how long those who are in that position will stay in jail or in prison, but as it stands right now is where do they sleep most of the time as of April 1st. And that is the question.
That decision, how do you get it changed?
Yeah, that goes all the way to Congress, ma'am. That goes to Congress, right? Yeah. How do I get it changed?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a clue, but I can.
Congress decided that we weren't going to ask whether or not you had papers and,
Right.
yeah, Congress.
I can definitely find that information out for you, and I can give you an answer. Maybe after the meeting, I can take your name and number, and I can find that information for you.
Okay.
Okay? Yes, ma'am. Any other questions, sir?
For the complete count committee, is it mostly composed of community-based organizations that have actual knowledge of working in and out of the community, or is it, to your knowledge, who is it composed of majority-wise?
So the question has to do with a complete count committee. Is it composed of members in the community? Is it community-based? The answer is yes. It can be any member of the community. Preferably, we want trusted voices. We want tribal members, if there's a tribe in natives in the land, in the area, military personnel, faith-based organization. You're talking about faith-based leaders, a chamber of commerce, city clerk or city council members, and it could be a parent. Parents have sometimes information that everyone else doesn't have because they live in the community, they engage in the community, they go to the store, they know who's who, they know who's doing what or what happened yesterday. And this is information that is available, but some people may have and some people don't. So we are encouraging any member to become a part of that committee. Does that answer your question?
But right now, what is it composed of? Do you know?
Right now, for 29 Palms, right now we have city council members. We have them on board. The college is on board. The Unified School District is on board. The Chamber of Commerce is on board. And we have additional business owners that are on board at this time, right? Yeah.
If the school district is on board, they would cover the unincorporated areas also, since the school district does cover that area?
If the school,
Morongo Basin.
if the school district's on board, would they cover the unincorporated area? They will cover their own school district.
Well, that incorporates the whole basin.
That will incorporate the whole basin.
Yeah.
That's correct for parents. Question on that side? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have two questions. So you mentioned the questionnaire comes in English and Spanish,
That's correct, ma'am.
but the 12 languages you referenced, that's just for outreach and advertising?
And the 12 languages will be done online.
12 languages online?
Yes, ma'am.
But the actual
It's on paper, Spanish and English, that's correct.
And then also, if a person, you get in touch with a person and they refuse to take part, is that illegal, or what is the response to that?
That's a great question. I have to be,
Are they
I have,
bound to
I
participate?
have to be careful on how to answer this question. What I can say is we cannot force anyone to answer the census. But the census is highly encouraged for federal funding. Now, I've been advised, of course, by the coordinator of the region that if someone does not want to put their name, they don't have to put their name. They can say respondent 1, my wife, respondent 2, my children, respondent 3, respondent 4. So that's an option. I'll tell you, I went to the Root Diggers genealogy presentation last week. These are the ones who try to find your roots, such as Ancestry.com. And they brought up a great point about not putting your name. We can't find your ancestors if people don't put their names. We can't find them. So there was a lady that she had a document, I believe it's from 1836. That was her great ancestor, grandfather, I believe, that he has answered the census and his name was there and all his family members. Now, if in 1836 someone would have said respondent number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's no way we can find those names. So yes, is it important? Is it necessary? To answer your question, for legal purposes, I can't say, of course. We encourage people to put their names, but it's not mandatory. But will it affect the future? Chances are yes, of course. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Any other questions? Okay, well, that concludes my my presentation. Just as a side note, we are in what is called the awareness phase. As of December 31st, the education phase, where we're trying to communicate to the community what was going on, that ended. We are in the awareness phase. And then we'll be moving into what is called the group quarters, the questionnaire assistance centers, that's going to come in place. And then, of course, we'll go into Census Day, and then we'll be going into the non-response follow-up. And that's where those individuals with taking the census, knocking on doors, that's where they will be coming in. Okay? All right, thank you everyone for coming, and there's information here. Thank you.